Hi, my name is Benedict. It's Mix Walkthrough time. You might notice that it's been a while since I've done Mix Walkthrough. I haven't done them as often as I used to. Not because I'm not interested, but unfortunately, what happens is that people seem to see these as a way of getting something for free, rather than understanding that this is my living, but this is a pro bono, something that allows people who are looking to do business with me to understand how I work, not to get either free mixes or which because you don't get the mix from this, and I had to learn that real hard, real early on, or they're using it as like, oh, well, you can just teach me how to mix by proxy. Believe me, that doesn't work out. It doesn't matter how much I look at Van Gogh paintings or colour by numbers, I don't become Van Gogh. Mixing is an art form. If you're not naturally sort of predisposed to it, move on. I'm not naturally predisposed to playing guitar, which is why I don't release guitar records. At least where I do release guitar records, which I have done, I will use a guitarist because, you know what, I'm a pathetic guitarist. So, mix walkthrough time. This one is, it's different. It's exciting for me, and I reached out on this one because I heard something that I liked and thought hadn't really reached its potential and that I could give it more lease on life. So if you think I'm saying my mix is better, yes, I am, but I have that right. If you like the Before Benedict Got Into It mix, brilliant, you have that right too. The singer is G.H. King Lord. These people are out of Ghana, North Africa, and the music was put together by somebody who I've known from around in the Reason community, David Nana Kojo Afram Sabi. The Africans do seem to have a different approach to names from us English type people. The song is called Exchange Rates. I'll pop a thing up there letting you know when the new mix plays in total. We always start with a little bit of background because it helps explain the whole process and the decisions made that we will discuss after the mix plays, and also helps you to understand a little bit about the artist, because the whole idea with Mix Walkthrough was that there was supposed to be a way of the artist helping to promote themselves, to be able to, face ham this mix walkthrough and point their fans to the new mix, therefore creating a sense of, hey, we're doing serious work. Other people are working with us. The song is, I assume, probably Afrobeat. I know nothing about the technicalities or the pedanticneries of Afrobeat, nor do I particularly care one way or another. To me, rock and roll is just, well, still rock and roll to me, to borrow from Billy Joel. But when I heard this, there were things that I liked, and something that I liked that appealed to me was this sense of what I'll broadly call dancehall, which was definitely the up-and-coming and incredibly influential sound around 1980. Between my first hearing this and doing this, I actually discovered Yellow Man, who I should have known of ages ago. But when I was a kid, from 10, 12, 13, suddenly all these songs are on the radio, from Past the Duchy on the left-hand side, through The Clash, Hazy Fantasy, all these bands that were actually very, very influenced by dancehall, and I heard dancehall in this, and I thought I want to really bring some of that feel into this because I think that it's going to suit it very, very well. My 2 cents is the outcome is like, yeah, I feel like I've had a real win with this. First, we start with an A-B. This is not the first mix that I heard. What happened to the first mix I heard, I do not know. I've heard a couple of mixes, and each one was different in some way, but this gives you a sense of what David had and where I started. Now, the first thing, obviously,
one district, one factory.
It's quiet. Now, that's why I know this isn't one of the original mixes, because quietness wasn't a problem. Too much loudness was a problem. So I've pushed, I believe David said to me that he had pushed 9 dB into the front of his masters, so I did the same thing to try to give ourselves some sense. So this
one district, one
versus
factory.
this.
Upon all this, you still can't fix the country. The whole Ghanaian
2 obviously being the new mix, 1 being the original.
Stay hungry, or from for beginning, I'll see a friend who levy. Ban your buy levy, penny. President advised the whole Ghana apology. Finance.
Now, mixing, as far as I'm concerned, and it should never be about little slices. So doing A-Bs like this isn't really very fair on anybody, especially you, the listener, because you're just hearing slices and it's easy to miss the whole context. A mix is about the whole song. If it's 5 minutes or something, which I think this is, then it's about how does this play over the 5 minutes. But in the A-Bs, we can hear a big tone difference. This is thin. There's possibly more bottom end, but it's thin.
Living a clueless life like a frustrated junkie. Sorry, the hardship in the country is becoming...
I wanted this to sound really fat and dubby and tubby, and, well, I think I got there. I was super pleased. I popped this up on the lounge room system and I was super pleased with what I've heard, not because of massive amounts of bottom end or whatever. Technically, there's probably more bottom end in the original, but in the mids, there's this really nice, warm, rich, deep feeling. And to me, that's one of the great things about reggae, dub, dancehall, all that kind of stuff. There's this really sexy kind of lope that is in the mids, not in the lows. It's illusion that makes us feel like it's in the lows, but it's really in the mids. So I wanted that kind of feel to come out. So if you're thinking, oh, but Afrobeat should be mixed this way, yeah, bully for you. Go mix it that way. Go ask David if he'll let you mix this in another way. I had no arguments from him, so maybe he'll be open to that. What I was chasing was that feel of what if this were done with my thinking and feeling of the stuff that I grew up with. But it is not an attempt to clone any of that stuff. It's just like to say, okay, this is what we've got. This is what I think this is really saying and should feel like. So moving along, that's our A-B done. We will now listen to the whole song in its entirety. Is singer G.H. King Lord. The music was put together by David Nana Kojo Afram Subby, and the song is called Exchange Rates. It is a political song, but not, well, obviously I can't understand half of it, but I think it works quite nicely because it's a universal of calling out to our governments to say, hey, are you really looking after us right? So in terms of politics, I actually like that sentiment. Do I agree with it? Not relevant. Is it a human thing? Does it express something human? Hell yes. So in that sense, I think it's great. So, exchange rates.
G.H. King Lord, popular of Show Them Entertainment, Sergi Abbas, New Engaladima, Sammy Flex, Bukumba, New Savoir with the first. Okay, debi asemti ye dikwedwa ye jane hunu. Ghanaian politicians abremo ninye sem hunu. Yato abama ni padese na inye odwan funu. Enunti muni entrant se oyiri ni okunu. Muchira ye dia konyina na muja ye gotopono. Planting for food, one district, one factory. Upon all this, you still can't fix the country. The whole Ghanaians they hungry. Upon for beginning, I see a friend who levy. Ban yo ba ye saw levy ye penny. President advised the whole Ghana apology. Finance agreement they start to defeat it. Sorry, $1 is equal to 9 point something Ghana city. One ball of kenke keke to be 3 Ghana city. What the PD? This will say most of our leaders very silly. Living a clueless life like a frustrated junkie. Sorry, the hardship in the country is becoming so unbearable. Blaming it on Ukraine, Russia war is irresponsible. Arise, Ghana you, cause most of our leaders won't be sensible. Paimuka, Kanewu, I'm unstoppable. Where the country they drift towards to be very terrible. We get everything, but we still get tired. Kwame Kuma, come see your beloved mother Ghana. Kewa ya wepa me kewa pa wabe ya migu. Petrol, electricity, water bills to the rise higher. About what we allo atawani wafewa yakoma. Okay, Mr. Dampari, make sure Ghana police service to they show some level of maturity. Not in region, in Krasa, Akachi, a drug killing, as well as killing of Ahmed Swali. For never happen again in the pages of our history. No one is above the law, you and me no say. That be reality. How come a country full of natural resources go to IMF to borrow money?
How come your fundamentalists
strong and the whole Ghanaians are bleeding. I say the exchange rate will expose you and your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar running faster than the city Baumia?
Vaya di botigi de mia di bebaba e non ti mo caso na moya yensa ayu sana bia sitze hafa oda seninya tu mi pena na twinyi na sika urefi washa mundi shega na fuana Ghanaian politicians and community ma for years go preach you go see bafuana vaya di botigi de mia di bebaba e non ti mo caso na moya yensa ayu sana bia sitze hafa oda seninya tu mi pena na twinyi na sika urefi washa mundi shega na fuana Ghanaian politicians and community ma for years go rich you go see Bamuyada Ghanaian politicians and community ma for years go rich you go see
The exchange rate will expose you and your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the whole Ghanaians are bleeding? I say the exchange rate will expose you and your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar running faster than the city Baumia? Nipa trembo sumono ya nyambutre Mempe brewu nyami lebetre Uni baby da fiber who te sekutre na nyamya kwansi santi se Usmakitre Ye musa chere jene de isha de naji wa kwanchre Wabo brand mya winya oh sister achre Still the value is the same Ugusu di bre Take it easy nyabutre Bibia ye mre So nyami na chri boni Na di no bre Atanfunya nyami chale Omu bebre They wanna see me fall So nyami neni me shebre Back to the sender glory be To Jehovah, ready to overcome, oh yeah, we take it over. No weapon formed against me shall ever prosper. Which I'm rolling, here I am, come to conquer. The exchange rate will expose you and your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the whole Ghanaians are bleeding? I say the exchange rate will expose you and your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar running faster than the city Baumia?
All right, as the echoes fade away, Exchange Rates, sung by G.H. King Lord, music put together by David Nana, Kojo, Afram, Subby. I like it. Now, if you wondered why, because normally on these I will put an artist picture or the album cover or something like that, artwork, there is nothing, unfortunately, none was provided. The singer, it seems, didn't see the need. Why that is, I don't understand. I have not spoken to the singer. I do just think it's a real shame. I don't know what the market's like. I don't know how easy it is to get any kind of mileage there. But I think it's just silly not trying because I think this is cool. When I very first heard this from Original Mix, it caught my attention. I'm biased, but I think that if I heard this on the radio, especially if I heard it a couple of times, bearing in mind that I would be listening more to probably what you might consider alternative radio, college radio or something like that. Great if it can get up onto mainstream radio, but I think if I heard this a couple of times, I would probably be pretty darn interested in it. Whether I ever went and bought it is a whole other thing, but it would get my attention and I would remember it. So I think there's possibly some missed opportunity in here from somebody in terms of thinking, hey, how can I get somewhere? As to whether you can get somewhere, who knows? But if you don't try, if you don't show up, then it's a missed opportunity, and I feel like there's a real shame in that. Musically, I will admit, on very first listening, and then as I was starting to put this together, I sort of felt like, it's a bit light on. What appealed to me, what drew me in initially, was the singing, because there's some nice melody in it and everything, and that's cool, and that's a bit rare these days. There was some variety in it, but I've added a lot more variety in the different parts. You hear quite distinctly different parts, different styles on the vocal parts, and that's something that pleased me and I've pulled out. But once I'd got the mix happening and added movement, I'm always looking for movement, not in a forced kind of a way, not about just, automatically applying LFOs and doohickeys and MSEGs and stuff to things. That annoys me a lot of the time. But just in adding movement, I started to realise that this music was actually really, really nicely put together and really suited what was going on, because it is, if I'm thinking something like dancehall, it is a sparse style. But once you get a nice mix and a lot of kind of gluing it together and building this environment, then the brass parts and initially the guitar part seems a bit, but as we get into the later instances of it, it just, I think it's really, really good that it comes together very, very nicely as a whole. So we've A-B'd, we've listened to the new mix. So then it comes to setup. I got a Reason file. That's how I know David, through Reason communities. So I got his Reason file. And I will say, and I say this almost every single time, oh, what a mess it was. It's really important to build structure and logic in what we do. One of the big frustrations, and one of the reasons I often lose clients before we've even really gotten going, is because they kind of want to wing it. They kind of want to work in a mess. And the problem with working in a mess is that you go in circles and you don't have a clear sense of a target. They might think they've got a clear sense of a target, and they may feel even like working in a mess makes them more creative, more artistic. But the problem is, as long as you've got a trillion options, you don't know where you're going, and you don't know the validity of any choice you make. Therefore, everything you do is cool. It's an easy way to fool yourself. And you can also easily fall into the fear trap, which kills so many people. And I see this over and over, and I wish I could just take people and rattle them. I try verbally, but that just pisses them off. But what am I going to do? In the sense that if every choice is possible, then every choice is equally as cool as everyone, which means that every choice is equally wrong. It's like you ask somebody a question, if you have a game of chess with yourself, who wins? The instant answer is, oh, well, I do. But then if you stop and think about it for a little while, okay, while you won, you also lost. Negativity is very, very powerful. Therefore, we tend to feel like, oh, this is pointless playing chess against myself because I always lose. There's no ability to caper and jest and go, ha, 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 you suck, I beat you, because you know that you are simply saying, loser. So we need to build structure for ourselves. So the first thing that I do is go into this and create organization. There was some instruments that I don't have that came across, and kudos, cool. David had bounced them down. I renamed them so they were useful, because saying brass bounced didn't help me any at all. I know it made sense, but I then straight away, before anything else, took that MIDI, folded it up, put it right at the end. Yes, it still needs to have a mix channel, but I coloured them using a colour I never use for anything, and just pulled their faders down. Not muting them, not taking the stuff here and muting it. It's just like, very clearly, this is not in the game. If I wanted it, needed it, it was there. So it was good that it came over, but it was a jumble. There was stuff everywhere. Okay, he puts his vocals at the top. I get people do that, and I can see a logic in it, so no argument there. I always put mine at the bottom because, well, that's just what I do. There's no right or wrong there. His vocals were together, but they were jumbled up and named oddly. Fair enough, he can go, well, each producer, whatever, can say, oh, but that makes sense to me. But move past yourself. As I've said a time or two in these things, what if so-and-so famous producer X were to wander in through your back door and say, oh, I like what you're doing here, mate. Can I have a go? Then you want that person to be able to understand what you're doing straight away, not look at it and go, oh, yeah, fuck, what the hell's you doing here? Because that puts them off. It stops their creativity. So if you're stopping somebody else's potential creativity, you're ruining your own. So really, 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 David, this is not specifically at you. You just get in the line because you sent me this one. And you said you wanted to learn. The thing is, really importantly, so many people could do so much better if they just started using a structure. Whatever structure you use is your call. By structure, I do not mean building templates where you open a file and everything is already there done for you. That's not structure. That's just rigidity or stupidity. But put things in a certain organization. When I start composing, yes, the first few things go in just the order in which they happened. But there is a sense in that. That's the order in which they happened. But once I realize, okay, this is what's going on. I've got drums which are, fulfilling a normal drum kind of a role. Then I drag them to the top. Why? Because that's what I do. You can drag them to MIDI channel 10 and put them halfway to China if you want, if that works for you, but it's got to be logical. It can't be a mess. So, some time taken, put this all into the usual order. So we've got our drums into a drum bus, our bass, and then our drum and bass into a rhythm bus. The piano, there were 2 instances of it, so I put them into a piano bus so that I could handle them together. In some cases, I would handle them separately, but these were designed, as far as I was concerned, to be one sound. Therefore, they must be processed together. Then our melodic sounds, but these brass, again, seemed to be designed to work as one, so I turned them into one synth, and then all of these melodic sounds, piano, what have you, all into a bus called Melodics. Vocals, I picked out what were the lead vocals as such, although not with the chorus one. I coulda, shoulda, but it just didn't happen in the end. And I gave them the lead vocal colour and all the backings, the supporting vocal colour into the vocal bus. You see that my buses, my main buses, are going to another bus, which is this. So it's very easy for me to pick something up. I'm only hearing the
Make sure
rhythm
Ghana
section.
Police Service to they show some
Only
level of
hearing the
maturity.
vocals.
Nothing rigid.
I'm only hearing
Dracula.
melodic stuff. You don't need to do that in your own projects. I don't do this in my project, my personal ones, but I never have this many tracks. But when I'm mixing a bigger project, and if I were working bigger projects myself, no doubt I would do this because it gives me a layer of control that I can just go, oop, and it's gone. Yes, we could just go, oop, and it's gone here, but I've given myself a very specific place. That's a personal choice. I will pop up a picture which shows this laid out across the 3 monitors because I work on 3 monitors. If you're serious about this, look at getting as many screens as you can. Reason is designed to run on 3 screens, so if you're using less than 3 screens, you're probably limiting yourself unnecessarily. One of them is a 19-inch monitor which was lying around, so use whatever the hell you've got. I've got a pair of matching 24s. If you don't have matching screens, it is a bit annoying, but the 19 in the middle works just fine for me. Matter of fact, having another 24/3 would become hard to actually see. Now, as usual, I started with vocals. I don't do a lot of soloing. Solo is important, but one of the great advantages of this system is that I can drop things out.
Oh, sister, still the value is the same. Take it easy,
So I'm able to focus very clearly on the thing that I'm looking at, in this case, vocals, while still having an awareness of what else is there. There is a master in here. I hate one screen, so if you see me getting confused with it, that's why. Let's get this out, because decisions won't seem the same if we've got things in there that were not there when I was making my decisions. I will leave in soft tube saturation knob because it's just always there. That's the sound of my reason. And we'll leave the maximizer because we don't want anything to be, well, too loud. So I started with my vocals. There were some funny things with the vocals, but they had already been prepared and I was told auto-tuned. Whether the main sections are auto-tuned, I do not know. It doesn't sound tuney, which is, well, good, because I do not like tuney as a pretty firm rule. But there is a section that's clearly been processed. There is some editing, and the editing was, and this is not the first time I've seen this. Matter of fact, most time I get editing, it's rough. While in many ways I'm a fan of rough work in the sense of being raw, but there's a difference between raw as in extremely passionate, Iggy Pop rolling around on the stage, drinking his own vomit or whatever. He'd never done that, I don't think. But that kind of raw versus just ragged, as in I couldn't be bothered to be more detailed. We've got to be a little bit more detailed. If we're making edits, we want to make sure that they are clean edits for what they're trying to achieve. My understanding is that there were some naughty words that might have been taken out. What they were, I don't know, because they're in, I'm not sure whether it's African or French, but they were in language, therefore I couldn't get them. But a lot of times I get things where things are chopped off. So ends are just too close and they end up being chopped. And you don't want to do that. Everything's got to feel natural. If you make things feel unnatural from the beginning, they will never feel natural. So I did a little bit of tidying up here all the way through to get those. There are different vocal parts through here. We've got this one, which is an intro. We've then got the main verses. These verses, or choruses, I like that. I think that's really great. Back to verse, chorus. Actually, no, sorry, this is not. This is, they called it raga. That's real toasting, Jamaican toasting. I like that. I like toasting. I've always liked toasting far more than straight out just square rap or mumble rap. Toasting is cool. You've got to be good to toast. And back to here. So I wanted each vocal part to have a fairly distinct feel. They've got to be consistent across the song, but distinct feel. So we went in, and so let's just solo, even though I don't normally, and pop out all of our bits and pieces. This Some of this sounds like French, and some of it sounds like it possibly is African. Maybe there's a pidgin or a patois or something like that. Not that it matters. It works, and I think it's great when you can get foreign language stuff that still works. The fact that there is an English section each seems to...
Your friend who Levi, Banyo by Yevi, said sorry. $1 is equal to 9 point something Ghana CD. One ball of kenke.
It gives me enough to be able to locate, oh, well, that's probably about the same sort of thing. So you take a song like Nina's 99 Love Balloons. It's all in German except for Captain Kirk. And yet it still works so very, very well. The English version doesn't work as well as a German version. So this is a raw. Oh, sorry, I did miss something in mix setup, and that's just so important. The reverb. Let's go listen to our reverb. It's quite a busy, active sort of reverb. It is, I'll have to rescue all my VST. It's my own creation. I've used this a lot. It's all over Naked Head, all over Jake Cropley's record. It's all over my records. It was designed to be an old-style tank without trying to emulate anything, but an old-style platey, tanky kind of a thing. I love the sound of this. So we've got... quite a echoey sort of sound, and there's a tap that's out there late, so it's an actual echo. Quite a bit of modulation, so it's a thick reverb. I then did a little bit of processing on top of it, which was to pull it into a compressor. Not a lot, just a tiny bit, just to squishify it a little bit, reasonably fast, and then EQ. So it warms it up a little bit. And the EQ, it's probably not super easy for you to hear, but the EQ takes out just, you are naturally with this style of reverb going to get some room resonances. Now, I like that. That's part of the reason why I like these kinds of reverbs, because they build resonances, which, when you get them right to match what you want to achieve, whether that's the specific instrument and the sound and feel that you want, or the sense of a room or space, then those are really, really good. You do just need to control them a little bit. So rolling off some stuff, and that is my reverb. So first thing that I did once I had everything laid out, before I did anything else, was get this reverb sounding the way that I liked. So if we go F6, F5, over here,
FF to borrow money. They be asempty ye dikwe ye jane hunu. Kanya politicians abremo ninye sem hunu. Yatu abama ni padesina inye odwan funu. Enunti moni entrant se oyirini.
So the reverb's having quite a big impact right from the word go. I've done a lot on reverbs, and it's really important to me that we create the space, and this was the space that I wanted, that I felt right from the beginning. I wanted this to feel like, as I always joke, deep in the heart of Trench Town. That's the feel that I wanted. So there's a Bob Marley-esqueness to the politics in here. I wanted that kind of feel, that this was being recorded somewhere like that, not in a top fancy studio using fancy gear, that it was being recorded. And Bob Marley was recorded in fancy studios, let me tell you, but they didn't want him to sound that way. So reverb was super important for me. Once that reverb was done, then I started the mix. So we get our rap.
Planting for food, one district, one.
There was a bit of noise. Headphones probably been used. There was a little bit of spill in here. Not terrible, so don't normally use gates, but gates were called for, so gates got used. I didn't want a compressed sounding sound, because I didn't want it to sound compressed, but I wanted it to feel supernatural through using compression. So he's got this delivery style, which is very, very much a part of rap, toasting, even though this isn't fully toasting. His next section is, but I really wanted to highlight and emphasize his delivery.
That be reality. How come a country full of natural resources go to IMF to borrow money?
I'm just not hearing it in the headphones, which is not surprising. Fairly even and flat.
Planting for food, one district, one factory. Upon all this, you still can't.
So we should feel a little bit more. It's not going to be massive dramatic, and I could definitely hear a lot better in speakers than cans, but cans are very undynamic. So compression was designed to, in this case, really see how it's fairly slow on the attack, fairly fast on the release. We really just wanted to on the beginning of the line, so that gives him more cut without actually having to worry about EQs and things like that to try to get cut. There is then
the whole Ghanaians they hungry or for
a fair amount of delay on here. If we kill this for the moment,
sorry, $1 is equal to 9 point something Ghana cedi. 1 ball of kenke 2 Ghana cedi. What most of our leaders very silly, living a clueless life like a frustrated junkie. Sorry, the hardship in the country is becoming so unbearable. Blaming it on Ukraine, Russia war is irresponsible. Arise, Ghana, you, because most of our leaders won't be sensible. Paimuka, Kanewu, I'm unstoppable. Where the country they drift towards no be very
I deliberately, you'll see, turned off sync right from the beginning. It's like, okay, let's move this to find a time I like. And it's got a groove, it's got to move, it's got to be a little sloppy. And that way we've got all this movement, we've got our echoes happening from here already in the room, and then we add this extra layer here, so we've got this huge amount of dubbiness that's going on. And that's That's really pretty important as far as I'm concerned to be doing this. We've also got the echo.
Water bills to the rise higher. About what we allow at our new warfare Yakoma. Okay, Mr. Dampari, make sure Ghana be the BSMT Yedi Quedwa Yejane Hunu. Ghanaian politicians Abramoni and Hunu. Yatu Abamani Padasina in your Ojan Funu. And
See what's happening with the send?
Muchra Yedia Konyana Namuja Yokotopono. Planting for food, one district, one factory. Upon all this, you still can't fix the country. The whole Ghanaians, they hungry.
So I'm sending to emphasize the ends of certain phrases. And I do it a lot. You can hear that echo going the whole time, and then it just throws on the ends of a lot of lines where I just want to emphasize, where I think he wants to emphasize, where King Lord wants to emphasize. It's relatively subtle but quite noticeable in terms of feel. There are other ways to do it, but I've done that just by using a send and return off to here, and then setting a sound that is quite warm and quite narrow. It needs to be narrow, otherwise it just clugs up the mix, but it's adding this constant sense of movement, and this did need a lot of movement added to it. That is our lead vocal. Moving on to our, because we don't want to forget the reverb, that has a backing. Typical enough in a rap type situation to have just these emphasis words. Same process.
For the PD, is it responsible? Leave it more sensible.
This I did compress heavily so that it evened it out a little bit. Generally, his vocals were fairly even. There was one section that wasn't the chorus, I think. I tried not compressing it, and then I found I had to because it was uneven. But I wanted to create a very thick sound, but without kludging the mix again. So using a similar sort of approach to before, but just being quite a bit more brutal, just to create. So because we hear the beginning of the words, then we tend to follow them. Powerful on its own, and then of course our delay. And once we put the two of these together, we'll fold that one up.
Okay, Mr. Dampari, make sure Ghana Police Service do they show some level of maturity. Not in region, in Krasa, Akachi, a drug killing, as well as killing of Ahmed Swali, for never happen again in the pages of our history. No one is above the law, you and me no say, that be reality. How come a country full of natural...
Now, it's not super obvious, but I just want that feeling of, oh, it embiggens, as he adds these extra words. So, was pleased with that. We can fold him up. And then there was just some little bits and pieces. It's only used here. There was some... These got worked pretty hard. These sit inside the mix. While attempting to rise them fairly high, as with some sound effects later, I wanted them to stay right under the mix. The thing is, people will hear them. They may not hear them the first time around, but you want people to listen over and over and keep finding things. So these are in there. They are distorted. They are much deeper and richer, and we've got a lot of echo on them.
Come to conquer. Come to conquer. Rolling Abraham, come to conquer. Come to conquer.
There's one of my own I use quite a lot. It's got a pair of echo times, left and right, and you'll see they are radically different. I actually want this to move.
Come to conquer.
It moves from one side to another because the delays are different. This one starts pretty short, but then each time it comes, it actually moves. So the echo is designed to move around. Then there are 3 more delay taps which are built from these 2 timings, and that creates a kind of reverb. We put that back in. So the echoes are there, but they're not as stark. There's this reverb built into them. And it's a unique sound. It's a unique sound because, in part, nobody else has this device. And I'm not going to say I'm the only person in the world doing this. I have not invented this technique by a long shot, but I don't hear other people doing it much. Although I did hear a mix the other day where I was amazed how much echo the guy had actually used. So we've got our main vocals there all put in. Then there's this next bit, the raga. He calls it a raga. Again, I feel like it's toasting, but I'm not here to be pedantic. This, straight away, I wanted this to sound like it was through a megaphone. I'm not being literalistic about it, so I just went on feel. Okay, I want it to be thin. I want it to be a little scratchy, a little abrasive, but I still want it to be beautiful in its own way. I hear a lot of times where people do this kind of thing, and yes, they may have technically got a more accurate megaphone sound than I've got, or maybe even used a megaphone or whatever, but it's not necessarily beautiful. It just kind of stands outside of the mix. I was listening to something of CLA's, and I sort of thought, ooh, that stands outside the mix. Now, I have a lot of respect for CLA, and I like how aggressive he is in how enthusiastic he is in getting into things, but I felt like, oh, that just kind of stands out. Over time, you get used to it being that way, but I felt like, oh, it wasn't as elegant as it could have been. I love the toasting feel here. It's already on the thin side. And another one of my specialist delay lines. This one wasn't designed to have a unique sound, but it does. Quite why? Maybe because of the module I used for the delay or module for the drive or something or other, but there's something about it that's just, it doesn't sound like I meant it to sound, sort of thing, as in it's got this character and it's somehow a kind of like an Alka-Seltzer sort of a feel to it. So I set my times, quite a diffusion or separation for left and right to stereoify. So we want this to feel like it's bouncing around a space. Thinned it up quite a bit. And you can hear, I'm not looking to lock this into being perfectly. I want this to be, because that way we're creating our own grooves and polyrhythms. A little bit of modulation on it. To be honest, this modulation probably, the knobs need more throw, but that's part of the sound of the device. And I was really pleased with the way that this comes and it sort of floats. We've got that second sound here. Now this is coupled with a backing part. So seeing I'd already used Echo Nest, I used it again. But if I recall correctly, and things were panned, and this is where it's really annoying with one screen. Where's my panning? There. Yes, so the main vocal is center, and its backing is off slightly. So that creates more space and some movement in it. There's this movement. As to the side that it went, well, that was shared with and balanced with other instruments. The raga is off to the side right from the beginning, but then its backing is off to the other side in a more dramatic sort of a fashion, and a little bit of the mismatch in the echo times was to make that move. So the first echo on the left is closer, which is here, and then it's designed to move across here. So it moves towards the main or the lead in this case. Very important there. I really like that. It's rhythmically and musically works really, really nicely. And by having the main guy with his megaphone on one side and having the crowd response on the other side that flows into it, it's saying these people support this guy as well. This guy has a backing. He has a groundswell. There's a movement happening here, boys and girls. So it was very, very pleased with that sound as well. And then in the middle, there's this chorus. And I love it. I think it's just super. Actually, we won't go with that one. We will go with this one.
Exchange rate will expose you when your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the whole Ghanaians are...
And it's a different vocal style. It's really quite different. It seems, and this is completely from a layman's perspective, it seems more like an Indian kind of a song at this point, and it really stands out as different. I think it's great. Nice melody, singable. Your fundamental is weak. Oh, I don't get what that means, but it works. I like it. It's very memorable. It's very singable. And we've got this. Let's open this up.
The exchange rate will expose you when your fundamental is weak. Oh no.
You can hear somewhere something's kind of cut off.
The exchange rate will expose you.
Different here.
History. No one is above the law. You were me no say that be reality. How come a country full of natural resources go to IMF to borrow money?
They overlap. I don't know whether that was deliberate or what, but it's interesting. It caused me to have to solve the problem, but this is great. This is really good dub practice, whether it's as a result of or not. It works really nicely, and we get this sort of religious sound. I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, wow, it's really kind of religious. Not in a creepy, kooky sort of a way, whether that's part of their thing, that's their damn business. I don't care. But I really played that up. So in this case, yes, we had the gate, brought in the compression. Let's pull out the other sounds for the moment. We'll get rid of the panning. I don't think it's that important anymore.
The exchange rate will expose you when your fundamental.
This might well have been tuned.
Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the whole Ghanaians are bleeding? I say.
As I said initially, I didn't compress this at all. I wanted this to feel as open as possible, but then I found that it was a little uneven. So I was tending to have it too loud and too soft, too loud and too soft. So I used this just as a leveler, hence being sort of fairly fast, just to try to give the impression that it's all the same level.
Will expose you when your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar running faster than the city bawood?
Then I went backwards and forwards a few times on this.
The exchange rate will expose you when your fundamental is weak. Oh no, how come your fundamental is so strong? And
I did like quite a bit of chorusing. It wasn't as aggressive. I made it more aggressive and then pulled it right back because I decided in the end that I wanted to focus more on the echoes. Again, this one is one of mine. I use them because I know them really well. I know what they're designed to do. I know what their quirks are. I use the echo a lot too, because I know that thing super well too. But where I want character, these I know I'm going to get character. I'm going to get a sound unlike anybody else's.
The Ghanaians are bleeding, I say. The exchange rate will expose you when your fundamental is. No, how come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar running faster than the city babunya?
I had this really loud, to start with, to get that feel of sort of church, of religious singing, which it did very, very well. The problem was that we got to the point where we were starting to lose the words, and that to me is a serious problem. So I kept a little from column A and a little from column B.
You and your fundamentalist we go no. How come your fundamentalist
Dry and
so
forward.
strong and the whole Ghanaians are bleeding?
Big.
The exchange rate will expose you and your fundamentalist we go no.
Again, that sense of slapping back, those echoes create this big space around it, a lot of warmth. So it took a couple of goes to get this right, but I'm still really pleased when I hear that come in, especially for the first time. It's unexpected. It's like, oh, that is good. So whether it was planned or not, kudos for having this in here. That was really nicely done. And King Lord, if you're watching this, I am impressed with your delivery. So often people just kind of can't be bothered to deliver well, and it ruins everything. Your delivery shows passion. The chorus also has this Now, someone decided to process that incredibly heavily. I don't know why. And on first listening, I was thinking that sounds like it might go in the bin. But it was put there, and then I found that in the right situation, it balanced up really nicely. So I gave it some quite false-sounding chorus ensemble-y kind of stuff using fast Fourier transform. It's already messed with digitally and false sounding, so I wanted to expand upon that and create, force a new feeling of natural by going further. And then, of course, my multiplier. So using the multiplier a little beyond where its primary aim is, but still within that, and creating a lot of resonant echoes which become a reverb. While I kind of like the hard nasal tone, and they sort of fit nicely. How come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar running faster than the city baumia? Adding in that extra chorusing makes it sit very, very nicely underneath because we have to pull it back. I don't want the two of these on top of each other. We haven't been looking at EQ actually. So if we look here just comparatively, that's our chorus, that's our backing. So we've pulled the EQ forward for our chorus. Let's just have him in solo. You and your fundamentalist we go no. How come your fundamental is so strong and the whole Ghanaians are... That's to pull his clarity, his presence forward. And then this one here... I'm pushing below where the main singer is. So the lead we're pushing up here, and then we're getting the backing in underneath, actually pulling out the highs so that they are not fighting with each other. There's no sense in that. So it's a real supporting vocal, as in it fills out what the lead is doing here. Different, unusual, but really nice and ultimately good call on this weirdly processed vocal. Comes out nicely. There's the section right at the beginning, our intro vocal, which is I don't know what style we'd call this. It's a sort of a rap spoken type thing. Don't know what he's saying. Beboba. Sounds good. Beboba. But I decided to make this conversational. The original mix had sort of got it forward like, oh, this is... But I deliberately wanted, because we move through different stages with what's happening, we've got the direct rap, which is... in here somewhere. Oh, maybe because I got that solid. Sort of forward and... But it's fairly... It's it's fairly one-on-one. This I wanted to be even more one-on-one.
Level
Then we
of
get
maturity,
to
not natural resources go to IMF
this
to borrow money.
strange sort of religious service. The raga, which I've put him into being a guy with a megaphone in the town square. Back to there. So this intro, the moment I heard it, I was like, I want this to be a lot more conversational. Granddad sitting down and talking to the kids in my day. So that was the tone and the feel that I wanted. I think that's what he's done. Yes, I'm speaking directly to you. I want you to hear my story. I want you to hear that we are unhappy with how we are being looked after, is what I think is being said there. The ha-ha-ha bit I don't get. There may be some nastiness in here that I am not aware of, but I've taken his tone and pulled that through and gone, okay, let's go. Let's lift this up here for now.
GH King Lord, popular of Show Them Entertainment, Seriki Abbas, UN Galadima.
Maybe he's just talking about himself. I have no idea. But I feel like this is the intro. He's talking to us. It wants to be intimate. We want to draw people in, as they put. Granddad starting to read the story, when I was a boy and blah, 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 blah. It starts to read the story, and that's the beginning of the movie. We then go into the story that Granddad is reading. So that's the way that I wanted to play that in terms of compression.
GH King Lord, popular of Show Them Entertainment, Seriki Abbas, UN Galadima, Sammy Flex.
Again, wanted it to come across as really quite natural. There is a bit of echo on this. So again, I've just gone with a general. It's fairly small. The slap is relatively close because I want to feel like this is a little closer, but it's not what we would call intimate. And then at the end,
Lord, popular of Show Them Entertainment, Seriki Abbas, UN Galadima, Sammy Flex, Bukom Banku, New Savoir Kwe the First.
I've made a feature of that laughter. I don't know what it's there for, but it helps carry us
New Savoir Kwe the First. Okay, they something
across. Otherwise, what happens is that it's kind of these things glued together.
New Savoir Kwe the First. Okay,
so it's that stops, something else happens, and then something else starts. So this ties these together.
Okay,
that's about saying, okay, how am I handling this scene so that it doesn't get out of control and lost. The extras are just these little bits and pieces here. They've already got processing and what have you from wherever they've been taken from.
It's still in the back. It's still in the back.
They've got panning and what have you on them.
The cat is out. The cat is out the back. The cat is out the back.
Just simple echo across them, just to make them feel like they belong in the space. Otherwise, they just feel like they're sticky taped on.
Okay,
see how it's just like, we're gonna stick that in your face. Like when you have kids and they come and, here, look at my thing. And you're just needed to be moved in space. So we get our vocal bus. You'll see these Hornet analog stages all over the place. They don't actually come in until I feel like I finished the mix. Once I think, yep, I finished my mix, it's time to finalize, then I will actually populate those. And checking, okay, do they manage okay for levels? Do I feel like they're adding something? With this thing, I always feel like it's adding something. So all I need to do is just check that my levels are not problematic. Generally, they're not because I don't mix hard, but sometimes they are, in which case you just got to adjust. So that's my vocals done. Once my vocals are done, I'm always looking for, and this is a little different from the average song, but does the song work?
For never
A
happen
cappella.
again in the pages of our history. No one is above the law. You and me no say that be reality. How come a country full of natural resources go to IMF to borrow money?
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. In its own way, it is beautiful. Because these overlap, you will see that I had to find a solution. So if we get rid of that,
History. No one is above the law. You and me no say that be reality. How come a country full of natural resources go to IMF to borrow?
they just come in and they fight with each other. And I don't know about the original mix, but there was nothing to indicate that anything was done there. And I was struggling, and then I realised, hang on, that's why I'm struggling with this. So
That be reality. How come a country full of natural resources go to IMF to borrow money?
rather than doing a straight or a sort of a scoop shape, I just pull it down just as it begins, and then we find that we start to just crossfade. We manage to cope with the pair of them at once. That made the mix work, and that way I could have these at a level that they needed to be at. Wasn't necessary here, probably because they don't overlap. So that's our vocals done, and I put a lot of time into those. If I'm not happy with a vocal, then I'm not moving forward. I'm either abandoning the whole mix, or I'm going to keep going until I'm happy that my vocal is beautiful and expressing what I feel like the song and singer were trying to do. So obviously, I don't know what he was doing, what his thoughts were, but that's what leads me to, therefore, this is where I have gone on that. Again, I'll leave that there for the moment. The next direction, normally with a more sort of guitar or rock type song, I will go to the melodic instruments. In this case, I did not. I went to the drums. You'll notice I did not start with the drums. I never start with drums, or almost never, because they're a generic part of the mix. People will be like, but they're all about the mix, everything else is irrelevant. But no, this is about this.
This
is what it's about. That's the important bit. So I'm making sure that is where I think it needs to be before I do anything else. Then, yes, I bring in the drums. Actually, I am going to need Alt F5. So I then bring this up. Sometimes I pull the vocal back when I'm doing this. So to make it easier for you to listen to, I will do that. Oh, let's just pull this out in case we need to see any panning. Actually, we don't really, not for the moment, so we'll leave that out of the way. Drums do sort of tend to come in and out. They don't have a lot of variety, but they do tend to just sort of come in and out. So we'll choose a section. Everything works together. I've seen people do this quite a lot, of using one drum device per channel and what have you. No, it's not wrong. It's not the way I do it. I just feel like it's inefficient, in the sense that God gave us multiple arts. Therefore, why don't we use multiple arts? But whatever gets you there, I guess. To me, it just sort of feels like a waste to load these samples and load this whole device 2, 3, 4, 8 times. It's only a couple of times here. When you're only using one sound out of it, why not load it and load each of your sounds in here and then track them out to different channels? But I guess it's sort of easier to set up this way, and if you didn't have a plan in the first place, then it probably seems easier this way. No particular judgment, but it's just one of those things that I think is inefficient, and seeing I work under the Stav's thing of maximum illusion, minimum voltage, this breaks that, because this is not minimum voltage when we could have had one drum machine. So we have this kick. and it wants to feel big, but at the same time, it doesn't want to be too big. It's a tricky one. So initially, this was what I had. Actually, to be fair, initially I had more compression than this. Actually, we better go down here and bypass that and bypass the rhythm bus. And it seems like it's a good decision, but the problem is that it just kind of isn't. It just became too much. There was no point at which I could really make it seem like it was working. So yeah, all very well to... But it just seems like I'm, well, kind of stroking it rather than finding out how to make it work. So I then came back and said, look, probably the issue is the fact that I'm not going to get where I want to with that kind of dynamic processor. So I used a clipper. Pulled back the compression quite a bit, and then used a clipper. Yes, we're adding 6 dB here, but then we're clipping it off, which is giving drive, crunch, and a oomphiness, a body to it, simply because we've managed to make it an awful lot louder whilst not allowing those extra peaks, well, to actually exist. And so hacking it off, I then got more of the sound that I was looking for. Maximum voltage, minimum illusion was very much the thinking there. How can I get this to seem whilst actually not making it waste an awful lot of voltage, a lot of space, a lot of level, and that was the way to do it. Obviously, it beefs up once we get into the buses. You will hear the whole thing beef up, and then the snare. Like most drum machine snares, it's, well, same. It's just the same. Now, there are various things that you can do and various things that I have done in different mixes, but I decided here I was going to leave that sameness, because if we are thinking 1980, guess what? The drum machine they used would have been like this. It would have been rigid, or 83 or whatever. It would have been rigid. So I've kept the original sound rigid, and then I've moved into playing with echoes. So if we look here, our echo here actually has quite a bit of automation. And then the final one. So very much playing with classic dub delay type stuff. And the echo is good for that, is designed for that. Whether it's exactly the sound, I don't quite think that the sound is right, but I may not have found that sound, but I like it. So we've got a huge amount of movement now with that snare. And again, notice that none of this is BPM synced. It's all done by feel. And every time is, well, they're the same as each other because the pattern is the same, but each hit is a little different. So we're changing our sub-rhythm, we're changing our polyrhythm each time that hits, which makes that snare move around tremendously whilst still staying really rigid. So I was super pleased with how that works out. The sound is thin, deliberately so it doesn't get in the way. Then we've got these hats, again another instance of this. And these instances actually seem to be to some extent the same, but they were an interesting sound. I did turn down the level of the one on the one side. They were hard panned. I didn't want them that hard panned. While it's dramatic, it just becomes too ping-pongy, it's too dramatic. So I just narrowed them just that little bit, which allows them not to be the things on the outside of the room. When we've got, let's say the Queen, or the King, but we'll say the Queen. We've got the Queen walking down the colonnade. Yes, there will be outriders to deal with miscreant peasants, to deal with people shouting about how she's not managing their inflation rates right, or whatever, sorry. But the emphasis needs, in that pageantry, needs to stay on Queen in the centre. If our outriders are dressed fancier than the Queen, or are leaping higher than the Queen, then the attention goes on to the outriders, not the Queen. Therefore, our whole pageant makes no sense. So I pull them in a little bit. We've still got the ping-ponginess of them, but they're not leaping higher than the Queen. And I also just changed the tone of them a little bit, just with EQ, to have them sit more comfortably inside and allow them to seem more central to what was going on. There, largely, I made no changes to the production, but that was one where I just wanted to make the change. Initially, I was making the change with EQ, and then I remembered, oh, hang on, I can change that one. So some from column A, some from column B. And then they go into a drum bass. And then a bit of the old scream. While we lose a certain amount of bass with this, we're lifting the frequency into this is where you mix, which means that it's got more punch. Remember, as I said right at the beginning, a lot of this is about mids. We want to get this up into the mids. Though we're doing that there and adding crunch and excitement and movement, because the way these interact together is now created as a together situation. You see, I didn't EQ that. I've EQ'd the original unique sounds, but I didn't bother here because this is adding some kind of EQ. We then got our bass. And this is a real subby-dubby sort of sound. In hindsight, I wondered whether I should have put a clipper across this as well, but bearing in mind I wanted a feel that wasn't sort of aggressively 2020, then I think leaving this like this was better. I think it's a preset, and I just filled it out with this Hertz delay. Yes, it has more directness there, but it kind of all seems a little bit, well, stuck on. Doesn't have magic. So now I've spread it out and made it more subtle. The EQ is, as usual, to be emphasizing up here, which is far more audible, and the brain will deal with the subs. Yes, I probably could have put a clipper on it and beefed it, but I decided I didn't want to. Yeah, if I was going for commercial release for right now, maybe I would do it, but this is my mix. It's the way it's going to stay. And then, of course, it all comes into a rhythm bass. Put on a little bit of compression. Easy to do this kind of stuff. And while it sounds impressive in its own way, we lose natural sense of groove to it. That's those done. I'm not going to focus too much on the instruments because we're a lot of time in already. I know most people don't want to watch these sorts of things this long, Piano sounds, we had these two sounds. One's dark, one's light. I had to name them because they weren't named. They were just called piano. You're not useful. So I put the pair of them together. Give them brightness through using scream, so a little bit of tape drive and compression inside that to pull these into one sound. We don't want to be hearing two pianos, we want to hear one piano. And then to stop it from seeming flat and paste it on, an echo. Easy to think that should be like right forward in the front, but no. Actually, I'm going to get that vocal back up too, otherwise we can't hear the mixed decisions so well. Hear how it's dead? Now it's moving, and it's got a space. There are these odd guitar parts. Initially I thought, oh no, yuck.
Sorry, $1 is equal to 9 point something Ghana cedi.
But
One ball of kenke
they work out really nicely, especially as we get into this section. So they're really a clavinet line, just using a guitar sample. That's cool. So just you can use one of my own echo units to place that in space. A big issue I notice with a lot of particularly modern mixes is just a stunning lack of depth and a fear of using echo. They seem to have a fear of using reverb as well, especially using one on the bass. Oh no, it might sound nice, but there seems to be this real fear of using echoes, delays to place things in time and depth. So that's what that does there. Strings. I do like the ID8 strings. So again, just an instance of this to give it depth and movement and space and beauty.
Make sure Ghana police that be real natural resources go to IMF to borrow money.
And they are relatively low in the mix, but everything's relatively low in the mix, but because it's so sparse, you end up hearing things and you hear them louder than they really are because you bring them up, which is right, because it means you bring them up to the level where you want them to be based upon your interest in them. There's then the brass. There were two lots of brass. And initially listening to them, I was like, oh my God, these are nasty. But this works nicely. There's nice composition in here. And again, I decided, well, okay, if we're playing with it being early 80s, and in reality they're at Psalm West, even though we're trying to pretend they're deep in the heart of Trenchtown, then Psalm West would have had a Fairlight or a synclavier or something like that. So that's probably what they used to do these. In which case, yes, samples, dead ducks, but let's make them come alive, which is by pushing them together. They sound great. Pan them out. Push them in together hard. And another one of my specialist echoes. So between the compression and then the embiggenance that comes from the ambience that the embiggener is doing with its layers of echoes, so a kind of reverb, makes those sounds huge, despite them being really quite tiny. Maximum illusion, minimum voltage. So, nasty. Struggling? Commanding, despite being actually quite quiet. Then there's a synth line that appears through things. Not there. And I like the line. It's a cool line. Just wanted to darken a little bit. And another instance of this modulate that has this ability to somehow lift the feeling of things a little bit.
How come your fundamental is so strong and the dollar ready wash up on the share gun of water?
This I have panned about a little bit. So you can see that most of the time it's in one side and then it moves to the other side, depending upon what's being sung. Because in some sections it works better there, and other sections it works better there. Couldn't decide where it should live, but because it's quite quiet in the mix, but it is a cool little hook, then I could keep it quiet in the mix and keep it more noticeable by moving it around, not ping-ponging it. There is no direct logic as to why it moves. It just does. The melodics all come together and get put through their Hornet analog stage. So that's the mix. Then it comes down to obviously making sure that it's right and then just finalizing it. I went straight to this guy and I did something I wouldn't normally do. I actually flipped through some presets. I was like, I know this has got some quite warm, fat, chewy things I probably wouldn't use myself, but I wanted this to feel, as I say, that it had this being done in a relatively cheap studio in Trenchtown kind of feel. Therefore, thin and flat, rich and tubby. That's doing a whole lot of things, level, this, that and the other. It's munging all over the place, but it has a charm. And it actually lets the voice come up. It's squishing a lot of the highs. You hear the hi-hat backs right down. Then, when you get the tape concept right, this is great. I like this device. It's unique. Most other manufacturers probably would have been more like, oh no, we have to be more. And these guys have just made some executive creative decisions as far as I can tell. And I think that it's a really, really cool device, which is why I reviewed it for higher hertz, and I still use it. It's been on several of my albums and will continue for the foreseeable future to be my sort of tape saturation type thing. I then put in a compressor. This is just to emphasize the rhythm. Very mild because we've got a lot of compression coming in from here, but I just want to push that movement a little bit. Yeah, I know I've got tape, but tape and scream. I do prefer a brighter mix still. I worry that analog tape is possibly just making it too leaning. This has a nice way of sort of brightening a mix without EQ and adding a little bit more to it. So I'm big on that. Saturation knob was already there. What did I do with this? Pretty mild. Just finding the tub area, a sound that I don't love. Just pulling it back, it's like a 1 dB will do, and then opening up the air. Oh, rolling off the subs. Nothing useful in there. So that's air that pulls all of that forward again. It pulls his vocal forward again. Then just levels. Bring it right up. You go over a couple. I let the limiter handle the excessive stuff. but no look ahead. I let it be relatively slow because I want all that to go into a soft clipper. I could probably turn the limiter off and then just pull it back by 0.3 of a dB. I don't know what his actual numbers are, but its absolute maximum is going to be 0.3 of a dB. Yes, people say it should be lower, but I've never had a problem with this. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes it done. So we started with...
How come your fundamental is so strong and the organs are bleeding? I say the exchange rate will expose you when your fundamental is...
It's a lot thicker, a lot richer. While this has a lot more... It's kind of really scooped. Like ding, 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 boom, 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 boom. And not as much in between. And the vocal to me seems quite dry and unmoving, which also points out any kind of tuning or whatever that's done. This is big and moving and very rich, velvety in a not velvety sort of a way, because this isn't Roxy Music's Avalon, but to make it feel very touchable, which you prefer your business, but that's what I did. And head on back to the beginning where you hear the new mix run. This is where I got to and was very, very pleased. If you have any questions about this particular process, what I've done, or are looking to have mix work done, because that's what these are about. They're showing my ability, what I could do for you. If you've got pretty good stuff, and this is good, but it didn't sound like this to start with, then I would be delighted to sit down and have a chat with you. Share this around, please. Share it. That's what makes the internet work. Have a great day.